listener production.
Hey, Tara Cassidy with you and welcome to The Briefing. What if I told you that many of you listening are at risk of experiencing depression or anxiety during one of the most exciting moments of your life? And that battle will impact not only you, but your partner, your friends, even how well your kid's life turns out, with very little being done to fix it.
What we have in Australia is a really, really big, tragic problem in our communities. We now have the opportunity to act on that rather than just keep throwing billions of dollars at this mess that we have actually overlooked. We need to move beyond research to be able to actively change the narrative for the next generation of fathers and families.
My chat with two dads pushing for life-saving change is coming up in the second half of this episode. First though, let's get into the headlines with Chris Spiru. It's Thursday, the 11th of September.
Hey Tara, and to you listening. Support's being thrown behind Liberal Party leader Sussan Ley this morning after her decision to dump Senator Jacinta Nampijinpa Price from the shadow front bench last night. It comes after her refusal to voice support for Ley's leadership and after a week of infighting over her comments about Indian migrants in the wake of the anti-immigration rallies that took place across the country.
There is a concern with the Indian community, and only because there's been large numbers, and we can see that reflected in the way that the community votes for Labor at the same time.
Despite pressure from some within the party to apologise for those comments, which Nampijinpa Price incorrectly suggests that the government's migration program favoured Labor-leaning Indian migrants, the now backbencher had this to say yesterday.
While, my comments were certainly clumsy, unfortunately, the issue that's of great concern, which, I won't be silenced on, is the issue of mass migration in our country.
And while that had been her line throughout the week-long spat, it was this response to a question about Sussan Ley as Liberal leader that was her undoing.
Do you have confidence in her leadership?
Look, again, those matters are for our party room.
Do you have full confidence in her leadership?
Those matters are for our party room.
With Ley just hours later notifying the senator of her dumping.
Jacinta Nampijinpa Price critically failed to provide confidence in my leadership of the Liberal Party. Confidence in the leader is a requirement for serving in the shadow ministry.
In a resignation letter, the former National Senator reiterated her comments could have been clearer and that she was disappointed that her broader message on mass migration was misunderstood, adding no one person is bigger than a party, and she's sure the week-long infighting will ultimately, quote, make our party stronger. Very interesting there, Tara.
Yeah, interesting indeed, because it clearly shows that some lessons haven't been learned by many from the recent election, which the Libs lost after a lot of infighting, and Sussan Ley had to deal with the coalition breakup, then getting back together, which was that first big test of her leadership.
Yeah, and this latest incident with Nampijinpa Price is just another, but many political experts are saying that she was really left no other choice. I mean, you have this senator who's jumped ship from the Nationals and then she's coming to your party and she's pretty much saying that you're not good enough as a leader, while she hasn't said those words, by deflecting, it's kind of the impression that you're getting there. So, they do run a risk now of taking her off the shadow front bench. She'll now become a backbencher, which means she's even more unchained to speak her mind very freely. As to next steps, there is, a thought being thrown around whether or not she'll hop back to the Nationals. We've heard from National Senator Matt Canavan. He said he will welcome her back with open arms, like the prodigal sister. That's a quote there. Whereas the party leader, David Littleproud, says he's not too fond of that idea, but if that's how the party decides, then he won't interfere with the party decision there.
Overseas now and to the US, where Donald Trump has confirmed highly influential and popular MAGA campaigner Charlie Kirk has been shot this morning while hosting an event in Utah, leaving him in a critical condition. In videos circulating online, Kirk, who has more than 14 million followers on Instagram and TikTok, can be seen getting struck in the neck while speaking at a planned rally attended by hundreds of students at Utah Valley University.
Not counting gang violence. Great.
Now, for those who don't know who this influencer is, he's best known for his open debates with US college students on campuses right across the country, and they're almost always controversial. So they include topics like gender roles, queer rights, race and religion, and his clips are always going viral. So while this story is developing as we record, we have heard from the university who's confirmed Kirk was shot and that the attacker isn't in custody. The shooting's been swiftly condemned by Democrat US Governor Gavin Newsom, Republican Utah Governor Spencer Cox, with the FBI Director Kash Patel saying agents will be arriving on the scene very soon.
Yeah, and we've also seen posts from Vice President JD Vance and Secretary of Defence Pete Hegseth calling for prayers for Kirk, with the President taking to Truth Social not long ago, writing, "We must all pray for Charlie Kirk, who has been shot, a great guy from top to bottom, God bless him." Now, this was Kirk's first stop as part of a national speaking tour, Chris, and shortly before being shot, he had tweeted, "We are so back. Utah Valley University is fired up and ready for the first stop back on the American comeback tour."
Yeah, and look, because of the topics that he tackles, Tara, and because of, let's be honest, the situation in America with gun violence, people had long joked and there was a strong rhetoric online that someday this would happen to Kirk. And look, whether you agree or disagree with his politics, we're seeing that tragically unfold this morning, and we'll keep you updated with any developments on our Instagram at The Briefing Podcast as this story progresses.
Staying overseas and to Indonesia, where at least 11 people are dead, with more than a dozen still missing after flash floods struck 2 provinces of the island nation, including Bali. Torrential rains began on Monday in the popular holiday destination, causing flooding that has inundated and destroyed homes and landslides that have caused several tourist hotspots to become gridlocked.
As search and rescue efforts continue, authorities warn that the death toll could rise, with residents in Denpasar and Kuta told to evacuate, and Aussies in flood-affected regions being advised to exercise a high degree of caution.
Police have made a major breakthrough in their investigation into a string of antisemitic, anti-Israel attacks late last year and early this year, having now charged the alleged ringleader. According to New South Wales Police, 27-year-old Tarek Zahabe masterminded 4 of the attacks, with 26-year-old Kai Pickering as his accomplice. Zahabe is accused of directing Pickering to spray paint offensive messages, including swastikas, in areas of Sydney's Jewish community, including on a school and the Alawa synagogue, and setting light to a local childcare centre.
Police allege he also organised for a prominent member of the Jewish community's former property to be vandalised, including having the words F Jews written on his cars, setting fire to it and 3 other vehicles, and splashing red paint across his house. The incidents were among a spate of anti-Semitic incidents that police have been investigating as part of Strike Force Pell, already concluding a number of them were led by organised crime groups from both Australia and overseas to benefit themselves.
Yeah, and one of those attempted arson attacks at a Continental Kitchen in Bondi was actually directed by Iran, according to ASIO, which is Australia's spy agency. And despite forming part of the Strike Force investigation, police haven't yet confirmed whether these attacks linked to Zahabe and Pickering were among those criminal con jobs, but we will hear more with the pair due to front court in late October.
Cybersecurity experts are sounding the alarm over tens of thousands of documents, including passports and driver's licenses, that have been reported as lost in the post in recent years, saying it poses a huge identity fraud risk. According to the ABC, 25,000 IDs, including licenses, have been reported as lost in the last year alone, and over 3,000 passports since 2022, with security expert David Lacey telling 730 Aussies need to understand the risks involved with having an ID stolen, with crims keen to steal people's identities.
The general rule of thumb is that any government-issued credential that has a photo is of value to a criminal.
Yeah, and he says that criminals are basically selling our driver's licenses on the dark web every day and targeting other things like our credit cards, even our mortgages, Chris. And this actually comes after New South Wales Police just last month charged 3 men, including an Australia Post employee, over their alleged involvement in a $1.4 million mail fraud ring where bank cards were being stolen and sold to crims.
While some of the items reported missing may be due to things like incorrect details and packing problems, according to Australia Post, Aussies need to be wary and report any suspicious activity.
And in news that will make some of us mere poor peasants feel with delight this morning, Chris, Elon Musk is no longer the world's richest person.
Oh, what a tragedy.
He has been overtaken by the co-founder of US tech company Oracle, Larry Ellison, after the business's performance and profits surged in the last year, which also bumped up his whopping 41% stake in the company's shares, with Ellison's fortune now valued at $393 billion, so just under 10 bill less than Elon, who will still be wiping away his tears with cash this morning.
Oh, and it is apparently the biggest ever jump in shares a company's ever had, well ahead of Facebook's Mark Zuckerberg and Jeff Bezos. Oh, those poor billionaires, Tara Cassidy. Think of the poor billionaires this morning. I can only imagine what's going down in Musk's home right now. I'm just picturing like a child having a little bit of a temper tantrum in like a beautiful satin robe this morning. I really am.
Yeah, surely he will be devastated about this. And interestingly, this company, Oracle, that Larry Ellison co-founded, it was actually previously one of the bidders to buy TikTok from that Chinese-owned company ByteDance recently. And Ellison's also trying to buy Paramount, which owns MTV and CBS. And honestly, why do these billionaires got to have it all?
Yeah, they got to have it all, and then they're going to jack up our subscription prices, Tara. Oh, I do not look forward to that day. Look, that brings our headlines to a close for today. Coming up next is your deep dive, Tara, looking into the silent toll of fatherhood and the wide-reaching impacts a dad's mental health can have. Stick around, that deep dive is coming up for you next.
In Australia, nearly 300,000 men become new dads each year. Many of them just experience their first Father's Day in the weekend just gone by. And while becoming a new dad is a time of joy and excitement, it's also one that's linked with poor mental health in men. The reality is that 1 in 10 of those new dads will experience clinical depression, postnatal depression, and 1 in 5 anxiety. Coupled with the devastating rates of male suicide in Australia, it points to a bigger picture about men and fathers' mental health that we're still not getting right, which is having wide-reaching impacts on society. Recent studies have shown that a man's mental health affects how his child will go on to communicate, understand emotions, and experience life, while another found those with good mental health, social support, and loving, affectionate fathers are less likely to commit domestic violence. Yet, despite mountains of research and evidence on all of this, resources and support is still lacking. And those needing help say they're still battling ongoing taboos and stigma around what it is to be a man. One young dad who's experienced this firsthand is Luke McClounan. Luke, thanks very much for joining me on the briefing today. Can you start by telling me a bit about your story?
So I have a 3-year-old toddler, and then last year we had twins come into our lives, which was wonderful, but it was also a lot. So I suffered from a bit of postpartum depression for a while there, particularly straight after the twins were born.
What was that like for you?
So I'm someone who's very creative typically, so that's my outlet. When I didn't have time to do that and then all of a sudden had 2 additional babies to look after, as well as the toddler and my wife, who was, trying to focus on keeping 2 new babies alive, it did present in a way that was really dragging me down mentally. There was just this constant negativity and wave on me that was just pulling me downwards. I did just find myself very irritable, overly emotional, and really, really sort of struggling to break myself out of that negativity.
And there is research to say that what you experienced is quite common among men. I think 1 in 5 struggle to make an immediate connection with their kids. 1 in 10 experience postnatal depression. Do you feel like there was enough support there for you, given what you were going through?
It took a lot to look into the support. And I think this is the big thing with men, is that I was definitely feeling a lot of, well, why should I be feeling this way? My wife is the one who's just had these 2 babies and gone through this whole process. So what right do I have to feel anything? So then you sort of have this weight on your shoulders of trying to support everyone. You know, as I said, we have a toddler, so going through and trying to be, you know, almost 100% of the support for him, while also then trying to support my wife with what she was going through. There was almost like an imposter syndrome in the sense that why did I deserve to be feeling anything negative? How could I justify that? So I found it hard to just identify what it was. And then on top of that, I still had walls up that were feeling like just from a mental perspective, I couldn't break through to even find support, though I knew that it was there. When I did look it up, it was an understanding that, you know, men, it's okay for this to happen, but you're allowed to talk about it. But even knowing that, I remember lying in bed, having that thought in my head, you can talk about it, it's okay, and still physically being unable to just roll over and tell my wife how it was affecting me.
What kind of things weighed into that barrier to, you know, be able to access help for you?
It's definitely a societal thing that people don't talk about it enough, which then adds to that weight and that guilt. You know, I think as a man and needing to be a provider or a protector of your family, that's how it was manifesting for me. You know, I feel like I need to be the one that's holding everything together throughout this period. So then when I was feeling what I was feeling, I didn't feel like I had the right to do that.
There's a lot of research now that talk about the importance of a man and a father's mental health, even in relation to the well-being of the broader family dynamic, a child's own well-being growing up, linked to whether their dad had anxiety and depression. It can have an impact. Given all of this and given the fact we know that, you know, there's an issue with men's mental health in Australia, suicide rates are incredibly high, what would you like to see change?
Well, as the father of 3 boys, that's a big factor for me. And, you know, having going through it myself, the point now is to try and be as active and loud about talking about these things and the fact that it's okay. So I think it's just about trying to get as many people talking about it as they can, because once it becomes normalized, then it doesn't have to affect people the way that it affected me. It doesn't have to feel like a crushing weight or something that you need to hold back, because the world talks about it. The world understands and the world knows that, you know, it is a normal thing.
Luke, thank you very much for your insight and for telling us a bit about your story. I really appreciate it. And thanks for joining me on the briefing today.
No worries at all. Thanks for having me.
Another dad who's been working hard to help men get the vital support that they need is Thomas Docking, the CEO of initiatives like Dad's Group and founder of Man with a Pram. Tom, thanks for coming on the podcast. This research that shows a father's mental health directly impacts his family and own child's life outcomes. What do you make of that?
There's absolutely, in my opinion, both from my experience, you know, running dad's groups and running organisations and programs that connect with new fathers, that there's a direct correlation between those, I guess, tragic outcomes and the mental well-being of fathers. This new research comes out and it can unpack the whole self-reflection piece as you become a parent for the first time, but also as a child grows. You also realise your own deficiencies or things that you think may not be the best things about you. And as a child grows in further, you get triggered by your children and you realise, wow, why am I being triggered? And you have the opportunity to unpack why you might be like that and why some things are a struggle for you. It's that opportunity to explore what was my upbringing and what may have been provided and what may not have been provided for you. I'm learning how to better validate my children's emotions, but I'm not a level 7 ninja at that. And I do see other parents who are actually really good at that. So it kind of begs the question, well, what was different about my upbringing and their upbringing, and how can I learn and fill that gap that actually helps me be a better parent for my child?
Essentially what you're talking about there is intergenerational trauma, which is a very complex piece. If a dad-to-be or a new dad or long-time dad kind of recognises these traits or their own struggles in themselves, it's very difficult to overcome. How would they go about trying to tackle that?
Yeah, I think Intergenerational trauma is a very all-encompassing term that covers a whole magnitude and a whole spectrum of different elements and aspects. Everyone's had great and not so great experiences growing up. But I think what we've got here is this a space where we can connect with those things so we can become a better version of ourselves at the right time in their journey to parenthood, when you're going from, a dude to dad, or, from a young lady to a mother. These things are complex life transitions. I think the important part of this is for us to acknowledge, both at a local level and a systemic level, that there's work to be done. And we know, as the research has come out, a lot of the mums and dads' mental wellness actually influences significantly on the baby's cognitive development outcomes. That neuroplasticity of the brain, the way mum and dad connect emotionally with the child, emotionally with each other, these things are all influenced by our own mental wellness. So the new research is fantastic because it kind of validates those things that many of us would assume is relatively obvious, but it also sheds light on more specific areas of how we can translate the research and the recommendations into practice, so that the next generation of parents are going to be better equipped emotionally, physiologically, and from a community perspective to raise a child in this complex big world.
Another area that a father's mental health impacted in the family life was found in another study. And one really interesting thing that came out of it that I saw was this notion that men who have a loving, affectionate father or father figure were far less likely to commit acts of domestic and family violence. What are your thoughts around that?
It's interesting, isn't it? It's if you've learned nurturing, if you've experienced, lived through a nurturing environment, you're more likely to be able to empathize with other people, both your child and your partner. And I'm really, on one hand, disappointed because of the light that it shows, or the complexities it shows to what we have in Australia is a really, really big, tragic problem in our communities. But I'm also excited because it shows that we now have the opportunity to act on that, rather than just read it and see that as another piece of research data, rather than just keep throwing billions of dollars at this mess that we have actually overlooked. Starts right back up there in that, antenatal class space, where we can actually put a fence at the top of the cliff rather than mopping up the mess afterwards. Now, they're not really nice words to say about, the situation, but the reality is we need to move beyond research to be able to actively change the narrative for the next generation of fathers and families. And part of that is actually looking back at what we've done well, what's working well, and then implement that at a systemic level.
Tom, thanks so much for chatting to me today about this on The Briefing. Really appreciate you joining me.
Thanks.
That was Dad's Group CEO Thomas Docking speaking with me there, and earlier, young dad Luke McClounan. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Briefing. That's it for now. If you found it interesting, don't forget to leave us a comment or a review, or you can check us out on Instagram at The Briefing Podcast. I'm Tara Cassidy. See you next time.